It is now 7 o'clock and we are now live.
Cheaper.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Board of Health meeting. It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. We are now being recorded. We'll call the meeting to order. First order of business, roll call.
Tom here.
Joyce here?
Alan? Here.
Jack here. And Colleen is not available tonight.
All right, very good.
Everything okay?
Everything's just hunky dory, just won't be alone.
I always worry. Can't help myself.
Anyone in the audience?
We do have one participant named Mark.
All right, welcome, Mark.
Welcome.
All right, so we will go to good and welfare for the public. Anyone in the public? Mark, do you have anything you'd like to add to our meeting? All right, very good. We'll move on to new business. First item, amendment formatting for regulations.
All right, I did give the board a copy of the current residential rooster regulations and also a copy of the current town amendment tobacco regulations. Tom would like to discuss the updates and how they get revised. So I hand it over to Vice Chairman Tom Fickner.
Thank you very much, Jack. Yeah, these are two examples that I had Jack print up for you folks to look at. But just in general, with regulations as a whole, what I wanted to try to do is try to be consistent how we're applying amended information and how we note that on the regulations, kind of come up with a consistent format. We've had a couple of little differences between them. So for example, on the tobacco regulations, was it the whole thing you printed out for tobacco?
The whole thing is,
So page 6, tobacco regulations. And if you go down to, I think it's number 10, which is the area that we did a change and amendment to. How that got highlighted there, if you note, after in each of those sections at the end, it was actually a bold statement put on there as to when it was effective and so forth.
Okay.
Right. And what crossed my mind is sometime back, if you recall, we made a similar change in our rooster regulations, where we actually amended the purpose, which was section 2, first page on the rooster regulations.
Yeah, no, I recall that.
Yeah. And so we hadn't really done similar notation for that area. I mean, I know we have some, you'll see on a couple of them, we have notations at the top where we say when they were adopted, when they were amended, it's a little statement, up there.
Yeah.
The top part. So what I'm just trying to do is determine just a consistent application of formatting. So when it comes to making these amendments and regulations, the same process is being followed and the same notation format is being applied to all of them. Just to make it ease of use for people who are looking at the forms.
Right.
So for example, on like on the commercial, which you may not have an example of this one, the commercial residential dumpster regulations. They haven't?
no, they don't have,
Okay.
we moved it to that.
So the example of that one we did was, we don't have it noted at the top. When we adopted and amended, if there was an amendment, we did it down the bottom. So I'm basically just trying to apply
Consistency.
a set consistency
Being
standard.
consistent,
Yeah.
So if it's fine with the board members, what I would be happy to do is just kind of work with Jack and come up with the best format for applying on a consistent basis.
Sounds good
And
to
any
me.
thoughts you might have?
No, I like to have things consistent.
Me too.
Because otherwise it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to this and, I think that's great.
Even for us, for quick reference,
Right.
when we pull something up, to be able to go to the section and see when that particular section
Mhm.
was worked on.
Mhm.
Because we have so many things going on,
Yeah.
that sometimes it's hard to recall.
Oh, yeah.
So I sort of like the fact that with the tobacco regulations that we just worked on,
Mhm.
I like the fact that right at the section, the effective date,
I like that myself too.
because I mean, you can't miss it.
Right,
When it's done up top, I can't say that I don't like that. It's just that I don't know if there was something within the context precisely that was adjusted.
I'm trying to reach out to Northbridge, Gene Ganadnick, who does all the BOH from Northbridge.
Yeah.
This is how I started to do the regulations, and that's how she has it top. So I'm wondering if the dates, I'm not too sure, so I'm just assuming that the dates at the top is for the whole entire regulations, and when they make changes throughout the year or whatever, they just put the
the newest.
newest and put that date, because in her regulations, you'll see the dates at the top, but also just that section that was just amended type of thing. So that's how I was trying to.
I kind of like both. If that this at the top has sort of become a standard of the industry, I'm okay with that, but I also like the additional when we work on a particular section, having that effective date.
That bold.
Yeah, it almost reminds me, and you and I had touched on this a little bit, back in the day of college research papers or high school research papers, when you use a footnote, so that if more information or where that information came from, if the reader wants to be able to refer back, they can go to a footnote.
So are we talking about something like this? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, both.
So that, and then at the top.
Right. Now, we could, if it gets too much at the top, there's no reason we can't do it at the end of the document.
Sure.
Again, similar to research paper, you might see at the bottom of a particular page
Mhm.
that it would refer to a number,
Yes,
paragraph, and then at the back, you'd list your sources.
same thing.
So again, we can't recall everything that we do a decade.
Correct.
Right,
And that helps to help determine when changes were made, as opposed to assuming that it's always been there. Because sometimes, things get added or modified along the way for whatever reason. And the other part would be just with tobacco, how we recently just did that bulk addition. So in theory, then, that same concept, I think we'd want to apply to all those things we just added as of January 1. We want to somehow highlight when that they went into effect, January 1, 2024. As well, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, well, either that or from this day forward, so to speak.
Well, that was fairly recent. I mean, we have a list of those things.
Yeah.
He's got I know Jack has a template
Yeah.
that he produced for us. Just, that whole list. So I think it'd be easy to go back and bulletize the ones that were added, and we could do the same thing, keeping consistency in the document from the beginning, because I think that was pretty much would cover the amendments. I think prior to that, we really hadn't done anything to tobacco.
Right, and a lot of times, like I know when we talk about well regulations,
Yeah.
usually we just see revised and a date.
Correct.
Like right now, we're sort of going through the entire well regulation document.
Yeah.
It may not be necessary to be focused on a precise section.
Right.
Because it's sort of a major revision,
Mhm.
almost like when you put out the new edition of a book,
Sure.
you've done the whole, you've
Yeah.
gone through the whole book.
Yeah. So
Um,
this is what we've done. This is how our private well regulations.
Right.
So we have this cover page that's up there that people see first before they start to see information. And then we state, when they were effective, and then there's a notation for amendments. So that's another way we could go. We could put a cover page to each of these and do all that. So there's different ways we can do it. My goal is to just, whatever we do, we just be to be consistent across the board on all of them. So irrespective of what regulation we're looking at,
Right.
we know where we can find how the amendments have been noted. That's
I agree.
okay.
Yeah, so I would say whoever is the keeper of the documents, whatever seems to make the most sense. And then we'll just stick with the practice,
Correct, yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that way there, you know, if someone does have a question and they can't find the answer, at least we can look back and say, all right, well, this is when it was amended.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, when it was effective.
Right.
Because you're right, sometimes we may amend something in October, but it won't take effect till January,
Mhm.
the beginning of the new year.
Yeah.
So there's actually 2 dates for that one change.
Right,
The date we changed it,
yeah,
the amendment, and the date that
and
it's
the effect,
effective.
data went into effect, yeah.
And see how it goes, you know, I mean, the last thing we want to do is clutter the document
Correct.
so that people can't read it or don't want to read it.
Yeah.
Um,
It just highlights the, you know, the chronological application of any amendments that are applied to the regulation. And I mean, I know technically when we've had this conversation before, you know, I think it been mentioned that if you apply something to a regulation, you don't technically have to do what I'm talking about doing. I think it can just become part of the regulation was another viewpoint. But I just thought that for the purposes of,
Making sense.
yeah, having people understand what was the original, and then when did these other things come along just for their own edification and our own edification. So you're just kind of tracking it chronologically, seemed to me to make for a good process.
I agree.
I agree.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, cool, all right.
So Tom and I will work on that together.
Yeah, and again, whatever makes the most sense without cluttering the document. And then follow through for everything that all our regulations.
Yeah, we can work through a couple scenarios, come up with something, come back and present the final version of what we think would be a good way to go for you folks to look at and give your blessing to and say, yep, that's okay, or want to change it. And then go from there.
Yeah, I'm all for it. That maybe would have prevented some problems in the past, you know, and that's what we're trying to do, right?
Exactly. Keep
Try
things smooth
try not
now.
to make the same
Mistakes.
twice.
That's all I had on that.
That's good, yeah. We want to make a motion or?
Well, we're not
That
there
would
yet.
require more.
Nothing yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Course of action. A motion might be if we ultimately decide, when we ultimately decide to do a certain thing. For now, we're just kind of
Okay,
research, right? Research.
just checking.
Huh?
Just checking.
Yeah, just check.
Okay. Anything else on that? Any questions from the audience? Nope. All right. Moving on. BOH minute review and approval. So we'll start with June 26th, please.
All right, so for June 26, I've updated page 2, section 5C.
I read this.
All right,
What did we change?
It was just more in-depth, making it more detailed.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I read it and I said, oh, that looks right. And I didn't refer back to the previous
Mhm.
notes. So I'm fine with that. Anybody else want to chime in on that section?
no, I think that's,
I'm okay with it.
Okay. So we added more detail to it.
Correct.
Very good. All right, so I'll have a motion, please,
I
for
know that we accept
26th.
June 26 minutes as read.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Tom, I.
Joyce, I.
Alan, aye. We'll now move on to July 24.
So for July 24th, I've updated page 1, section from ED. Again, this is more greater detail.
I had read that and had no issues with it.
I've also updated page 4. Section 4D.
About 3, section C. Page 3.
Page 4.
Oh, I've got something on.
Yeah, yeah, we can go back.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Yeah, you skipped, that's okay. All right, so everybody good with 3B? 3B?
Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so updated
Page
also
1, 3B, everybody's good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll move on,
page 3, 4C.
yeah, 4C.
Again, more greater detail.
Yes, good.
And now we'll go to 4D.
I kind of blanked on this one, so I said topic not discussed, but in Tom's review of the meeting, it was kind of discussed. So basically just adding in that, yes, it was discussed.
Okay.
So revise my
Right.
thing there.
Yeah, you don't blank.
What?
You don't blank.
I what?
You said you blank on. I said you
Oh,
don't.
sorry, like,
All right, and
page 4, the last paragraph.
Yep. that's it for that date, right?
That is for that
Okay,
minutes.
so if everybody's okay with the new version, I'll ask for a motion to approve July 24th.
I make a motion that we approve July 24, 2024.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Tom, I.
Trace, I.
Alan, I. And now we'll move on to August 14th, please.
August 14th, I have updated page 2, section 4A. Again, greater detail.
Mhm.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll ask for a motion to accept the meeting minutes for August 14th, please.
I move we accept the minutes for August 14, 2024.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Tom, I.
Trace, I.
Alan, I.
Every time you say Alan, I automatically think Versum.
I'm sorry.
Versum.
Okay.
Alan Iverson. Sorry. Go Joe.
No, okay. Could be AI,
It just, it could be.
right? We could really,
Could be.
AI. All right, so now.
Good job. It was good.
Say Tom.
Tom did run through it.
Yep.
Okay, good job, Tom.
Give him a little massage.
Yeah, we massage,
Yeah.
just a lot, some of it was a couple of details I thought were important to keep consistent with the meeting. Because people read the minutes and then look at the meeting, you kind of want to keep that consistency.
Mhm.
Versus somebody seeing the minutes and see the minutes, geez, that wasn't in the minutes. But the same token, not trying to be too detailed because we don't have to be verbatim
Right,
in the minutes. We can, a lot of it we can get by with, discussion type of thing. And the meetings are available for people to look at. They want to really hear the detail. So,
all right, we move on to brand new meeting minutes.
Yep.
For Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. On this one. Has everyone had an opportunity?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, I did have a couple of things, couple of, minor things, but I wondered if it would be, as we did with the last group, if it would be an opportunity to kind of review again and kind of work with Jack and
absolutely. So you want to go back to the tape?
back to the tape. I like that. Back to the tape. Yeah,
Okay,
if that's.
yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, we have time, we have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, we're on, all good.
All right, so now we'll go to September 11th. You want to do the same thing there, Tom?
Yeah, there were a couple things there that if I
Okay.
could take the opportunity were could be before.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so August 28th and September 11th, we're gonna put on hold for the next meeting. And we'll go back to the tape. All right. Any questions from the audience?
So the 28th and the
September 11th.
11th are gonna be reviewed again.
Yep.
All right. That being said, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, BOH fee schedule review.
All right, so I presented the board with the fee schedules that Mendon Board of Health has. And I did a chart of what the surrounding collaboratives have also had for permits. The ones I didn't really get a chance to really compare apples to oranges was the Title V engineering fees, because a lot of the towns do their own things separately. So I was just gonna try to compare apples and oranges. But I did find the Board of Health fee schedule that was effective January 1st of 2008. And 9 out of 10 fees,
Yeah.
but they're currently the same right now.
The same as 2008.
Yes, I was so surprised when I.
Well, and I know we've had discussions on this.
Right.
I know that we've talked about our fee schedule.
Yeah.
Over the years that I've been involved with the Board of Health. So that is kind of surprising to me that we're back in 2008. I wasn't on the board then. Tom, I don't think you were on the board then either.
Not yet, 2012.
Okay.
2012.
So we know unfortunately that everything has gotten more expensive.
Mhm.
We know that the goal is to recover our expenses.
Mhm.
As close to net zero as possible.
Yeah.
In my head, I've kind of got a focus on initially how long it takes to do these inspections.
Mhm.
And the reason that I think if we knew how long it took to do these inspections.
Yeah.
It would be easier to put a dollar, an expense dollar on that.
Mhm.
Because we've got the wages that, if we talk about employees, we've got the wages that we pay them per hour, plus their benefits package cost.
Mhm.
And any expenses that they may incur if they're putting in for mileage, if they're not using a company vehicle to get around. So depending upon who we're talking about, whether we're talking about Jack or Colleen, which are Board of Health employees, we could come up with a pretty good dollar per hour figure if we knew a particular task took a half or an hour or an hour and a half.
And I would just say, just from an historical perspective, even though the fees for the most part have stayed the same for all these years, it didn't necessarily mean we needed to increase the fees, because for all those years, the structure of the Board of Health was different. It wasn't the same as it is now. Essentially, it was all contracted arrangements where people would submit invoices for a service performed. So our previous health agent was a contracted service. was not an employee. So, and I would assume for the moment that for all those years, whatever they were billing us for the services, fee was enough to cover the cost of the expense for the service. Now, we've changed a little bit, you know, we now have a health agent who's an employee, and some more things, so.
Well, and our health agent is doing restaurant inspections versus perk tests, which we now have a separate person to handle the perk tests and the septic inspections,
Yep.
and a separate person doing our engineering.
Right.
Yeah,
So on the engineering and on the septic inspections and perk test inspections, that they are contracted. So we can really very easily know what we're paying and what we need to recover for them. It's a little harder on the employee side to narrow that down to an hourly cost. We know in the past when we have had discussions on the fees that we found a wide range of fees, where sometimes we're off by hundreds of dollars and you kind of wonder why.
Now, when you mean range, you mean in comparison to other communities?
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
Because we looked at some numbers and we've said, how could it possibly, we charge a fee that high?
well, yes, and so that part of that discussion then could go to the fact that maybe we have here in Mendon have been very reasonable with our fee structure versus some other communities, maybe not being quite as reasonable. Because I have seen some, what I would say are some outrageous fee numbers out there in those communities. We don't have control of that, but I would say, I would think we would want to be working within reason for our community and keep that same concept of reason when we're applying fees. That's all.
Well, in some of those other communities, their expenses may be different too.
That could very well be.
Board of Health in the town of Milford has a truck with a lift gate.
Mhm.
We don't have a truck with a lift gate. All right, so our expenses are different. Some other communities may have, and I'll use Milford again, they have a transfer station that is available to the residents. That's something else that we don't have. The scrap metal facility for recycling scrap metal and batteries and disposing of appliances and things like that comes under the highway department, not under the board of health.
Yeah.
So to your point in the past that you've made over the years, we've tried to keep our fees reflective of what we have to offer and what we have for expenses. But I have a feeling that we're no longer in line.
I think that could very well be. So I think at this point, it sounds like what we need to kind of do is a little bit of a drill down. Right?
well, when you look at what we had in 2008 to what we have now, I mean, it was more in 2008, they were getting paid than they are now, which that, doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, another thing that I want to take into consideration is the projects that we're seeing today. We saw this a few years back with the septic system that the drive-in put in. We need to make sure that we're prepared to recover
Yeah.
those expenses for the extra inspections that are required for a system like that. And we know that we have more projects in the pipeline that are going to be a similar animal.
Yep.
So, I was sort of thinking, just like we have the rest of the food establishments, so many for 75 seats, so many for over 75 seats. I don't know if we need to develop, and I'm not saying that we can get all this done right away,
For sure.
but a scale, whether it go by square feet. I mean, we've got some buildings that are coming that are tens of thousands of square feet,
Yeah,
some of these
140.
warehouses and
Yeah.
things. Now, it's a warehouse. I don't know how that's gonna affect like a septic system or a
Right.
well, because it's a warehouse.
Right.
But we also have a plan that's being worked on for a supermarket, housing and, other retail. And that's gonna affect septic, that's gonna affect well.
Yeah.
So those are additional inspections, or it may be additional things that need to be dealt with on an annual or semi-annual basis to keep all those facilities maintained
Right.
properly. So, my goal is to try to get as close to net zero as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Well, I think, like you pointed out, I think it's, each category is gonna bring a little bit of a difference to it in terms of how we're applying the fee, right? What we need to do to adjust. One of the things that comes to mind when you were talking about the differences there is on something like, say, the application for a new system, right? Maybe we have on that application something that differentiates, say, base fee. Or send in some notation, if additional inspections required, could be at an additional cost, or something of that nature.
Absolutely.
Unless we know in advance, where we could say in advance, oh, okay, this, because I wouldn't want to necessarily charge, because these, I want to say alternative is the right word, but these exceptional systems are a rarity for the most part, right? They're not the standard. So something like the drive-in, a good example, that was an exception, specialized system, quite a bit of extra.
So it has the thing all on its own.
Right, and I believe
Right.
we said that, we verbally said that during the approval process and discussions with Tom Ryder. And discussions with the property owner, we said that, made those statements up front, that, a system like this is gonna require more inspections, and the normal fee isn't
Right.
gonna cover.
And that's why I'm wondering though, because should we be just highlighting that in some statement on that application? Because that's the same application that everybody's gonna pull. But the system they're gonna be putting in, somebody could be putting in something a little more different or specialized. So because everyone's pulling the exact same application, would want to note for it, that application in the whole, just in general, be advised that if, and however we want to word that, if the non-standard inspection processes are required, additional fee could apply.
Yeah, possibly. How often do you see Steve Donatelli?
Maybe like once a month
Okay,
in person.
all right. I didn't know if Steve or Tom Ryder might be able to help us on the wording,
Oh, for sure.
because that's something that we want to get on that application right away.
Mhm.
We may not be able to make all the appropriate adjustments in this, because we have to get those applications out in October.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So that statement and that wording,
Mhm.
getting on our application, would cover us until we can fine tune some of that stuff. The food establishment permits and like the septic pumping and stuff like that, those are probably some of the easier ones for us to do, because it's pretty much the same animal over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And we already have some breakdown, especially on the food establishment side. We just need to make sure that we're covering the costs.
Right.
So those will probably go pretty quick. The septics, the wells, and the perk testing, deep hole, some of that stuff may take longer.
Yeah.
Because if you remember when we were talking about Mr. Meehan's project on Route 16, Joyce, you were there in the beginning, Lenny was there, and that was just during the perk and deep hole testing. So before the project even got designed, the expenses were already higher than what's normally expected in those categories alone. So those are the things that we could protect ourselves. And again, we're just trying to cover our costs, but we could protect ourselves by making those statements in a engineering format on those applications.
Mhm.
So it's not just the septic system of plans, but it would pertain to deep holes, perk tests.
Testing, yeah.
Now, what I'd be curious to know is, because we're focusing in on, I think, a certain category here that might be of more concern than, say, another category, right? If we're able to maybe use the drive-in as an example, and being able to look back and make a determination based on how that system went and how the services that were applied to handle that system, engineering and inspection wise, how that ended up being from a financial perspective, cost versus what we obtain in the fees. I'd be curious to
Right,
see if that would be a good example to get an idea. Geez, did the fee for that system, maybe did that fee end up being enough for all that, or was there a difference?
I think the only problem that comes to mind on that is we had different people in play. I mean, we had Tom Ryder, but our health agent was covering multiple bases at that
that
time.
was Lenny.
Yeah,
We have invoices,
we do.
so the paperwork, I mean, we should have the paperwork in hand that reference that project, that we could compare costs to actual costs for the work versus what we actually charged on the fee. That would be my
Yeah, and
expectation. This is one example, maybe another one we could use, but
Again, I think that the fees for Title V inspections and plan reviews is gonna be set by Steve Donatelli and Tom Ryder.
so they get a flat rate,
Yes.
and that's fine. As long as we're covering the flat rate, that actually makes it easier for us.
Yeah, because that's how, because last year I was asked to Steve and Tom Reiner before January, well, the new fiscal year. I asked them, like, are you planning on increasing the fees? Because I need to adjust the permits. And they said, both said no, but probably next year. So that'd be 2026.
Okay, so we need to get essentially a price schedule.
Yeah.
From Steve and from Tom, as to what they're gonna charge for the services that they provide to us,
Okay,
to make sure that we cover any changes. And at the same time, we need to know that if we have any systems that are out of the ordinary, not run of the mill, how additional fees would be applied.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, Tom Ryder's been around, he worked on the system down at the drive-in.
Yeah.
He should be able to give us an idea, well, if it's a system similar to the drive-in, let's just use that for an example. You can expect that there could be an additional X number of dollars to cover the, extended plan review, to cover the extended or the multiple site visits. And Steve Donatelli should be able to tell us pretty much the same thing.
same thing, yeah.
If he is gonna be on a site for a day doing perks and depots, it's obviously gonna cost more than if he's on a site for an hour or two.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we had this conversation, I remember we were talking with Fred Lapham once,
Mhm.
and it was pertaining to the project up off of North Bridge Road. And bringing Lenny up there to witness the deep holes
Oh,
and the
yeah.
perks. Well, sometimes they're doing multiple lots, back to back to
Yeah,
back.
right, right.
So we're collecting a permit fee for each lot,
Yeah,
but it might go real quick.
right.
Because you're doing lot 2, 4, 6, 8,
Mhm.
right in a row, and then on the other hand, you could get to one of those lots and you could be digging all day,
No kidding.
depending
That's how
upon,
you done that.
upon the terrain. So,
With the t-shirt,
um,
sweatshirt.
we're never gonna get it, we're never gonna get it 100%.
Right.
All right, but to protect the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And try to, that objective of trying to get to net zero. And the same thing with Colleen. Colleen should be able to tell us how long it takes to do an inspection.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, once we come up with an hourly cost for her, the hourly wage plus the benefits package, I don't know, as a part-timer, what the difference is between a part-time employee and a full-time employee. But I mean, a benefits package could add 20 or 25,000 to an annual salary. If they're taking, especially if they're taking medical coverage. Medical coverage is huge. So we owe it to the taxpayers to try to zero in on that as close as we can. And we may find that we can't adjust the fees to cover those costs all at once.
Well, the only thing I would say to that point is that, the citizens, the residents in town pay taxes. And the taxes that we pay, I believe, should already incorporate the expense of personnel to run the town. So for us to try to look for something additional on a fee schedule to cover somebody's health insurance, I think might be picking at it a little too deep.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's already accounted for in the general, or should be in the tax base. Right?
Well, we've had this discussion before.
Yeah.
And we know what we've been told.
That's just my
No, I know,
thought, right, on that.
but we have to know which direction we're going in.
We do, and
No.
maybe it's a little more research
Mhm.
and a little more validation of the views, just to see, definitively, okay, this is something we would need to do versus something we wouldn't necessarily. Because ultimately, we're just trying to cover the cost of the time that somebody is spending to do a task.
Mhm.
That's essentially what the fee structure is designed to do.
Well, I guess my question is, we're being told this on the left. And this is on the right. Where is,
We gotta bring them together, so everybody's clapping.
and obviously, there may be more that needs to be done during the course of the year.
Mhm.
I want to make sure we do what we can that's fair and equitable in a very relatively short period of time,
Oh, and
because we're gonna get these applications out there.
Yeah.
So the fees, any fee adjustments that we see, looking at it from the surface,
Mhm.
we want to correct right away. And any statements that we want to put on our applications, we want to cover up that right away. And then as we go into it deeper,
yeah,
and maybe if we get some clarification on what we're supposed to be considering costs,
Mhm.
we can make further adjustments. Because again, my fear is that we could be, if we're looking at effective 2008, we could be more out of line. And we certainly don't want to make that correction all at once if it's going to create a hardship to our applicants.
well, I will say in general, and this is kind of maybe being more broad, from a budgetary perspective in general, the Board of Health has always, for the most part, I believe has always been on the positive. Meaning that there's always been, and they may not necessarily correlate to monies from fees, but in other areas where there's been surpluses at the end of a budgetary year that have been able to go back to the town for use, in essence, for residents or for town services, right? Back into the general fund, which is, positive. And one of the things that we are trying to do as far as from our perspective as a board, one aspect of the service with the trash program is to keep those funds within the program specifically for those people that use it. But for pretty consistently, there's always been, we've never really had shortfalls over the years. That said, wow, we're really underestimating the pricing of things out there. I think it's always been pretty much on the positive side. So, but you're right, it's definitely something we'll have to drill a little further down. And I noticed this attached to this, Jack has a nice little column here of proposed
There was no rhyme or reason.
versus current. And so, we may find that that proposed schedule, as we look at this, may in itself just give us the information that we need to say, yep, okay, that's the way we have to go.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the assistance. Okay, my question would be, is how, well, we'll just take the first item. Food service, 0 to 75 seats, we're currently at 100,
Correct.
and the proposed is 200. That's 100% increase.
That's correct.
Now, again, we don't want to be arbitrary about this, I understand that, but can we afford, can our establishments afford that kind of an increase?
Well, you have it from the view of the establishment affording the increase as one viewpoint, but I would probably more want to say, is it a justifiable increase from the Board of Health perspective? And that particular example, that would be where Colleen would come into play. So with a conversation with Colleen, we say to Colleen, Colleen, based on this particular element and what you do for that service, would you say that your time, that $100 fee is covering what you do? And basically, you're kind of doing a check mark all the way down and see where we might have to make an adjustment versus what is still good and applicable now. But we don't have to raise, but again, other folks have to kind of come into the sanction.
Okay, so we've got the items that for Tom Ryder and Steve.
Yes.
Tell.
Yes.
So we also need to have Colleen give us an idea, her take on where we're at and what's proposed.
Okay.
Now you came up with these proposed numbers looking at surrounding towns. Okay. Because it's quite a spread.
Yeah, there's really no rhyme or reason for
Yeah.
I'm just proposing.
Yeah, but there's quite a spread. I mean, if you look at the town of Mendon,
Yeah,
at 100, the town of Hopedale for 250.
right.
Well, like you say,
Northbridge
is that
for
because,
250 and
do they have-
Douglas for 175 and Upton 125 and.
do they have greater expenses? Do they have greater overhead than we do? Could that be a reason why they're charging more?
Well, what would be overhead? What do you mean?
Well, like I mentioned, the town of Milford has a pickup truck with a lift gate.
And I don't know if it's Upton, I get Upton and Hopedale confused. But one of them has a public nurse on Board of Health staff.
Upton does. Yes, as a nurse.
So do they have that instead of the VNA though? Because I thought that was an option.
Yeah, they have the nurse. I know
All right.
Upton has the nurse.
Right, but if they have a nurse, I think that might be an option to having what we have, which is the VNA service.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It's still an expense.
Yeah.
Right.
We pay a contract to the VNA, right?
yeah, and I don't know what a on-staff nurse costs.
Yeah, I don't know how that's structured for the town.
Right. Joyce?
Well, dealing with somebody who was back in the days, but I looked at I was in charge of a whole hospital in Pittsburgh. I was the assistant night supervisor, did all the stuff, and my husband was driving out all the old things, so I got paid for the year, $2,750 for the year,
I'm gonna hire you.
and I worked, I mean,
I'm sure you did.
Okay, so we obviously need to gather some more information. when do applications go out?
I usually do them, like, beginning of next month.
Okay, so we may be delayed a week or so.
Well, I can have Colleen, because I know Colleen's not gonna be at the next Board of Health meeting, because she's having the other eye done
Okay.
for her LASIK surgery, so
Right.
I can have her type something up for the board to review for the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it looks to me like that first section, food establishments, that's all Colleen.
Yeah.
Right?
Right,
So we could give her that, essentially that summary rundown. And based on what we're charging, she knows what she does.
Right.
Say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, we're currently charging versus, do you think we need to make a move?
Mhm.
And the same with the other sections. We'd have to go to those folks. Tom, Steve, some of the other areas with regard to engineering and inspection services.
Yeah, the hauler and installer, that stuff's pretty straightforward,
That's kind of straightforward, I think.
you know? I'm surprised at the spread when we talk about like a septic hauler going from 100 to 300. I'm gonna have to look what the other towns are charging here.
I don't think it's on here,
We got Northbridge,
but I mean, for those.
it's right down there.
No, like for Northbridge, 150,
Yeah,
Douglas is 125,
So we're talking about trash hauling,
no, septic installer.
why am I not seeing?
It's on these papers here. Because I printed out the Board of Health
Oh.
fees for every town,
Oh, okay.
because, yeah, as you can see, it's
Oh, right here, okay.
mishmash.
Sorry. Yeah, I did see that too, I mean.
Blackstone was 250 for an installer.
Yeah, so again, it just could go to different towns have different expense structures. And if
Well, yeah, I
you're
mean, some
thinking the
towns have a-
expenses are just higher in other communities, you know, the cost of doing business is higher elsewhere.
right.
Maybe we've been able to maintain a lower element. So that's why, you know, we'll drill down. Just revalidate where we are, it's, you know, it's a good exercise.
Okay, so along with the information that Jack is gonna gather.
Yep.
We should all take the next 2 weeks to review all this information in as much depth as we can.
Mhm.
And see where we agree or disagree with the proposed numbers. Especially when we're talking about like hauler installer.
Yeah.
Down here with the miscellaneous, that's just a matter of comparing what we got going on with the other towns. It doesn't involve an engineer or anything like
Right.
that. And see where we feel.
It's more or less permitting.
Right. And if we have any questions.
Right.
Right, I mean, I remember one time someone questioned us on a private well permit. I believe it was, and they wanted to know, well, what do you do for that $100?
It's a valid,
And we had to like, all right, let's think about this. What do? We just push paper? You know, in the office, or does an engineer take a look at it? We know now where you have to supply an engineered plan that an engineer is looking at that proposed location of the well.
oh yeah,
Before we had that, what were we doing for that $100 fee?
Mhm.
You know, because we questioned ourselves after being questioned. Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
have a little more knowledge on that particular item.
Yeah.
So we can go through and do what we can do. And in 2 weeks, we can try to accomplish as many adjustments as reasonably possible.
okay, yeah.
And then maybe this is something we need to, revisit maybe on a quarterly basis. So just so that we can we have time to make sure that the numbers that we're proposing for the changes
Yeah,
are applicable,
that's fine.
you know, because there's no way we're gonna accomplish all of this in time for this year's purpose.
No, I mean, so we're just kind of getting started in the exercise, so
Right,
a little bit at a time.
right. So I mean, half of these we may be able to accomplish and get put into play.
By January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other half are gonna take some more thought and some more questioning.
Yeah.
Because we don't wanna be just doing it arbitrarily.
Correct.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Yep.
You know, so I mean, some of these numbers, we may not be able to get where we feel is accurate for a, you know, it could be 6 or 9 months. So it could end up being for the next
Mhm.
renewal.
And in addition to not wanting to be arbitrary, we don't want to be capricious either.
There you go.
That's right, after capricious.
All right.
I'll explain that one.
I know that.
All right, so we'll do more homework on that.
Yeah.
And Jack's gonna gather that information from the whole,
It's very well done.
yeah,
Super job.
I tried.
Super job.
Try to make things nice and clear for everybody.
That's your private sector experience.
My private sector experience, correct?
Stand up.
I love
we're
that.
the beneficiary.
That's right.
Okay, so if there's anything, anybody from the audience have any questions?
Nope, wrong one.
All right. Okay, so that's ongoing. Whole business,
Got nothing,
No old
Not
business.
Nani?
nothing.
all right. BOH admin updates.
That is. All right, so for the Eversource property on Providence Street, last Thursday, Colin visually confirmed that the mattresses and the couch are still on the property.
Really?
So
How about the
I,
tires?
so I reached out again to Peter Bowman that afternoon about the lack of importance and necessity of cleaning up the refuse. Peter apologized for the delay and stated that it would be cleaned up shortly. I told him that was too vague. And I wanted a drop dead date for the cleanup. Peter said it would be scheduled no later than today. So that would be happening this afternoon. I personally haven't visually inspected the property myself, but I will look into it.
Okay,
But the gates are up
Mhm.
and they were up
last week, correct?
So that is probably, at least, that is hindering more, further crap,
Correct.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But, yeah, but come on. Hello,
Thank you for using a reasonable amount of force.
After 3 tries, I get tired.
That,
Oh,
like I said,
that's-
Like I said, this has been going on for a month, at least 4
well, no,
months.
we have
Well, we
residents.
were down, remember, we were downstairs with the ladies,
Yes,
yeah,
Yeah, no, and we need,
That
we
was
need
in-
to be
that
able
was
to
in the
give those
winter.
women, those residents,
yep.
right?
a definitive, you know, resolve
Mhm.
to this problem. So
I mean, the
I thank
tires.
you
the
for-
tires are terrible.
Welcome. All right, next update is 112, 114 Millville Street. A couple of months ago, the property owner for 112 and 114 Millville Street requested a local upgrade to the septic system as the property was proposed to be subdivided. After Tom Ryder's approval with conditions of the total combined design flow for both lots, they were restricted to 444 gallons per day, so both 112 Millville and 114 Millville would need a deed restriction limiting the bedrooms of both properties. The deed restriction was received and approved by Tom Ryder and was recorded with the Worcester Registry of Deeds a couple of weeks ago. So both properties are good to go for construction of the septic system. Next one I have is 3537 Hastings Street. With this project, a memo from an abutter, Peter Coffin, was received about his concerns regarding the infiltration basin with the intensive development proposed on this site that was already has high groundwater. I forwarded the memo to Tom Ryder for his review and commentary, but I didn't get anything back from Tom, so I reminded him yesterday of the memo, and he said he could work on it. I haven't heard back yet.
So, yeah,
Yes.
I spoke to Peter Coffin myself as well, because he sort of wanted me to be there.
Yep.
And he said that they actually had a very good conversation and he agreed with what Peter was saying and gonna work on it. They're gonna, do a different thing, so
Okay.
So
hopefully.
can you clarify that a little bit for me? So,
Well, what Peter told me was, he actually wanted me to come and be there. And I was like, I can't, I'm not, I haven't got the time in that particular day. And so they went, looked at what Peter wanted. Peter said, there's too much water there. And Kevin agreed that, and he said that he would take care of that.
so that was my other question. So so you have Peter and who are the other people involved? So Kevin?
Kevin, and so Kevin was going to talk to his people.
Okay,
And because he worked with him, because when we went to do the walk in the very beginning, Kevin was very angry with Peter and wouldn't let him on the property at all, which was probably, but he apologized for that, said, it was his mistake and his, blah, blah, blah.
okay.
So,
Just want to know the players.
yeah.
Okay.
It was, the two players were just them,
Okay.
Peter and Kevin.
Okay, so does Tom Ryder have to do anything at this time?
I don't know that.
I would say no, because why would he review and comment on something that's gonna be changed?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
So I'll tell Tom Ryder not to,
to do anything yet. And I'll call Peter tomorrow
okay,
and get back to you.
okay,
Because it sounds like from this conversation
Yeah,
that if Mr. Meehan is going back to his engineers, his
Yeah.
people, that they're gonna come up with something to address
Better.
Mr. Coffin's concerns.
right.
It's gonna be something different than what's originally proposed.
Yeah, I'll call Peter tomorrow.
So I would agree. That's what it sounds like. I just wondered though, from the standpoint of updating Tom on the most recent conversation, if it would be a bad idea to update Tom Ryder with some email.
no, that's what I'm saying, I'll let Tom know
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
that Joyce has talked to Peter, that they
Right.
talked.
Yeah,
So
Like
so wait a minute, there's some.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no reason for him to put eyes on what he has in front of him
I agree.
if it's gonna be a different plan.
Changed.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, so I'll let Tom Ryder know tomorrow.
right. And I'll try to get in touch with Peter tomorrow.
All right.
Sometimes he's in Nantucket, so
Okay,
I will do,
Great.
I should be able to get him in Nantucket too, sometime. Yeah, all right,
Appreciate it.
I will do that.
Thank you, Grace.
so for One North Ave, last month, the BOH received a response from the site developer regarding the BOH commentary review concerning the past uses of the site. And a site assessment be provided identifying and evaluating any existing or potential contamination and the development of a mitigating work plan if needed. The response was that the developer will fully comply with all required state standards, but are not planning to conduct any testing above and beyond. The board wanted to know if the response was too vague, specifically in the area of a 21E, which is the Massachusetts Oil and Hazardous Material Release Prevention Act. Tom Ryder said their response is vague because the state has no direct requirement for testing unless the state determines more information is required. Tom Ryder believes there may be a petition ability to trigger testing requirements, and soil testing for the septic system could identify visual concerns, but not replace a site evaluation by an LSP, which is a licensed site professional who is an environmental scientist or engineer experienced in the cleanup of oil and hazardous waste material contamination. So Tom Ryder agrees that it is too vague, but the state has no requirements.
So they were talking about arsenic is what they were talking about, because back in the day, they had fruit trees. And they would spray them, and, but again, that was probably 45 years ago. When they were there. And the orchard was,
The limited knowledge I have of arsenic is it stays like 6 or 8 inches below the surface and it's fine if not disturbed.
Mhm.
This is obviously gonna disturb it.
Mhm.
I am not an environmental scientist,
Okay.
so I would say they gave us a good answer, even though it is vague. Because they know more than we know
Mhm.
about
Right.
hazardous waste, et cetera.
But they don't seem,
But they're not,
willing and forthcoming enough to want to do a 21E.
right? So do we have the authority and the responsibility to require a 21E?
Question. I wonder if we could pose that of Tom, Tom may not.
Because they were there for years. Years, using it.
Yeah, well, we didn't know anything.
No, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, no, no.
not suggesting that.
Now
I'm
we-
just saying that, you know, if it stays in that 6 inches, it's not going into the water.
Well, again, and that's just what I was told somewhere
Right,
along the
yeah.
line. That doesn't mean what I was told is true.
Right, yeah,
So, again, my concern is if what I was told is correct. Oh, and I was told this, a number of years ago, maybe when the town was getting ready to buy the property from the
right,
Fino family.
right,
If what I was told is true or mostly true, my concern is now they're gonna disturb all that. And we have a school right there.
right. So look.
So I feel as though we have the responsibility to ask for a 21E. Because there's a school right there.
So I guess I would probably ask, A, what would the cost be for 21E to be performed? Right, be an engineering group. I'd be curious to know what the cost would be for that.
Well, it's probably substantial, but one of the things is
But they're
that,
done on a
that,
routine
that,
basis.
that lot, that one lot, that had only held the farmhouse. And well, I know, I understand, just let me continue. The farmhouse and the garage where they kept their supplies and their tractors and stuff. And beyond that, down a substantial, it was the orchard. And where they would be spraying and where, you know, that would be the area that would have most.
Possible.
Yes. I mean, well, they were actually physically spraying every single tree. So, I mean, there would be more than the house, which was only there, and they would, unless they were pouring arsenic into the barn.
Well, I'm just thinking of where the equipment was housed, where. it was-
Right, I agree. But what I'm saying is, you know, the orchard itself was getting sprayed on a regular basis. So, I mean, that would certainly have more, but how
Yeah,
much,
and
how
that's
much more
separate.
was the difference?
Yeah, and that's separate from this particular,
I know,
right?
right.
Let me ask this, would we take any comfort in the knowledge that the adjacent lot that is being looked at for the proposed new Mendon Senior and Community Center had tested clean because they were looking for arsenic in that area?
Mhm.
Is there any comfort in knowing that that area?
Well, yeah, because that was the area that had more than, I mean, than,
So the point being is that
I think
if we're comfortable enough, if we are comfortable enough that knowing that area was tested and that tested clean, would be comfortable to say, well, if that's the case, then maybe we don't need to push the 21E on this other lot right on the corner. That's my ask.
My thing I think we're forgetting is there was a house on that lot
right,
that didn't belong to the farm.
yeah,
That,
that house was the Taft house
there was a house, there was
behind,
another, no, there was another house on North Ave. Where all the people from Clough Park. You know how there's a wellhead sticking out of the ground?
oh, across the street,
No, same side of the street. There was another home there.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
That was a Dudley home. Isn't that Dudley's?
I don't know who lived there,
Oh, I think it's
but
Dudley.
that house was torn down long before the Taft house was torn down. Okay, there was a home there, and the well for that home, I believe, is the wellhead that's sticking
That's,
out of it.
that's used for the circus and everything. Okay.
All right, and I believe if you're looking towards Milford. So DB Mart is on your right.
Yeah.
The house was to the left of that wellhead.
Okay.
Again, where everybody, the overflow parking is for Clough, I'll call it. So we may be talking senior center where that other house was.
Yeah.
There was another beautiful old home, not as big as the Taft home, but it was a beautiful old structure.
And that's even in addition to the other home that was taken down just a few years ago. That was.
Right, that was the Taft home.
That
That was the Taft orchard, which was originally
Right on
the
the
Dudley
corner.
home.
Well, no, wasn't there a home
Dudley's was
on the left side of that lot that was taken down kind of in
on
the middle of the night type of a,
That's
well,
the
that's,
corner.
that's on the corner. They took it,
that was.
they didn't take it on. the middle of
That
the
was the
night. They
big house.
took it down right away because Fino did that. Took
Oh,
that,
I
took
was
that.
thinking it was on the other side.
No, it was right on the corner. It was the farmhouse.
Okay.
It was-
I guess what I'm questioning is, I'm gonna go back to, do we have the responsibility to require a 21E? And do we have the authority to do so?
Two good questions. Yeah, two good questions.
Regardless of where everything was at one point and where it is today?
Yeah.
Do we have a responsibility to the residents of Mendon?
Okay.
Especially those school kids, to require a 21E? But it's not enough to have the responsibility if we don't have the authority to do so.
So let me ask this though. So with regard to the movement of soil on that land, let's say for the sake of discussion, there is an arsenic element. How would that movement of that soil negatively impact the school across the street?
I'm thinking, does it get released into the air? Dust particles?
I didn't think that was an
I
error.
don't think
I
so.
thought that was strictly a soil
Yeah,
element.
I know, but I'm again, I'm an environmental
No,
scientist,
it's just- yeah.
but I'm thinking when you dig, especially when it's dry,
Okay, yeah,
you release particles into the air,
okay, yeah,
right? We've experienced it with the salvage place, with just vehicles driving in and out of there with the amount of dust
yeah,
that's
okay,
created.
Yeah.
Okay, and Colleen has dealt with that.
Yep.
Worked with the owner to, same thing could happen on any construction site.
okay.
So if that soil, if that chemical is released that way,
So the concern would be
kids are on the
that,
playground.
so the concern would be if that chemical could be a versus,
When the soil is disturbed, 'cause I was told
Yeah.
that it's fine if you don't disturb it.
Mhm. Well, what happens is when you disturb it, you move it to different areas, you potentially move it into water areas, right, like moving it.
Okay, versus air.
Well, I don't know, that's what I knew from the ground,
Okay,
I'm not sure myself, but it's a valid point. So, yes, if it's an airborne component, then now I see where you're coming from.
okay, so,
It can enter the year.
There you
okay,
go.
it
So-
can,
Yes.
yeah.
so
I just, I'm
we
just
need
going
to
to
ask
check
some
that
questions
myself. Yeah,
of people
yeah.
that know more than us.
Yeah,
Right.
Dan?
Again, and it comes down to, I feel as though we have the responsibility, but I don't know if we have the authority. Just my opinion.
So I would say, it sounds like I think Tom could be a good first contact for those questions. Given that he deals so much with the Title V and state requirements, he might know off the top of his head. And if not specifically, be able to direct us for confirmation of that answer. I would say if this board felt there was a legitimate health concern potential to the public, we would, I say, have the responsibility to act and would have the responsibility to implement such a requirement
So
to mitigate any concern. Absolutely.
from an engineering, environmental engineering standpoint.
There we go.
which-
What am I thinking?
Right, just so you know, that if in fact they did the testing where the orchards were, which has considerably more,
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, they were spraying that all the time. And again, I take your point about what's in the barn and doing that. But if they did the testing for the senior center and they said there was none.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we should call that person who did the impact on
The senior center.
the senior center and see get that information.
I could probably
That-
provide you the test results. I believe I have a copy.
Okay, well, I mean,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't want any kids to be, because I'm gonna have kids that are in that school. Great grandchildren, by the way, 7 of them. Will be going to that school, so your point is well taken, but from my own education, I'm thinking, if they tested it where it was really, really abused, and they didn't find it,
Well, where they tested, I believe it's the lower part below the wall that had the orchards. Is that correct?
right,
That's not the area they tested. They tested above the wall, but adjacent to 1 North Ave. So it's the upper part of that land. And they didn't do holes on the other side of the wall, to my knowledge. All the holes are on the upper.
so where they did their, well, they didn't do any testing for that sort of thing.
Well, the holes that they dug were, as my understanding, and I can get confirmation, were on the upper part, this side of the wall, not below the wall where the actual fields were.
Right, where the orchards were,
Right.
right,
So both sections, both the area that they're looking at for the senior center and 1 North Ave are on this side of the wall.
right,
And as, as mentioned, the 6 or 7 holes that were dug for the senior center land
right,
tested clean,
right,
and that would abut 1 North Ave on the upper side.
Right. but that would be where the barn would have had an impact. Well, the barn was right behind,
Yeah, the barn was behind the house, but going down 16. See,
the barn was, the barn, so this is,
You have the
Okay.
orchard here, this is
Okay.
the. Say, this is the corner, this is 16,
yeah,
and this is 1 North Ave,
right,
this lot here,
right,
and this is senior center.
right,
This area here is where they did the holes for the testing above the walls.
and my thought is that the first house that was torn down,
and they had, the barn was here and the house was here, they had a big house here.
Right.
Okay,
It was a 2-family
Yeah,
house at
yeah.
one point. This was the barn here. And this was the orchard down here where all the spraying was.
my thought is that that's where the first house that was torn down was.
Right here.
up in here.
It was a smaller home.
It was, I think it was the Dudley home.
It could have been. I don't
I'm
remember.
pretty sure that was
I
the
was just
Dudley.
kind of surprised when it was purchased and torn down.
Mhm.
Right,
I don't know who purchased it. I'm assuming the Fino family purchased it
right,
to expand their area.
right.
But I was surprised it was torn down. I can almost picture when I brought my kids, my twins to Clough, I can almost picture the family that lived there.
Right, me as well. But,
Couple of little kids,
right,
mom and dad, and like I said, I believe
What-
that wellhead.
what happened here was Fino wanted to put in like a Stop and Shop or some kind of grocery store or something like that and wanted that whole piece for parking and that whole thing. So I think that's why that came down.
Okay, well.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, I apparently, I mean,
So I think maybe just to kind of end the One North Ave, I think maybe reach out to Tom to see what his thought is on a couple of questions you posed. Authority in 21E, right?
Well,
With regard to the ability, right, as a starting point. I can obtain those test results and I can show them to you,
right,
so you can see specifically.
yeah, Joyce, you'll obviously understand when you read.
right,
You'll see the measurements and the readings. And
Right.
what's done.
Right.
And we'll have that data. And then go from there.
I'm curious as to what 21E costs,
And cost of 21, yeah.
just,
Yeah, I'm just curious. Because
I
I
know
can't
that- I
say.
know they're done on a regular basis, I've seen them done.
Because I can't say that the testing that was done for this lot for the senior center was an actual 21E. I can only say that testing was done,
right,
but a 21E, I think, connotates a specific, something specific.
Right, but you said that it tested clean for arsenic, which is what we think would be
Is to be
found,
found.
that would be hazardous. A 21E is done very commonly, like at a site that was previously a gas station.
right,
So they're not looking for arsenic, they're looking for gasoline and oil, petroleum
right.
Okay,
type things.
Interfering with the water, but,
so because we're specifically talking about one component being arsenic,
right,
are we saying that wouldn't fall under what's done under?
I don't know.
it would,
It would still fall under.
yes,
It's still a hazardous material,
right, yeah,
Okay,
but I don't think it's what is commonly looked for
gotcha, okay,
when a 21E is done. Now,
gotcha.
well, no, because see, I mean, arsenic, I mean, it would have to be a farming thing, because that's what they used, they used that as a, you know, stupid, yes. Effective, yes. Still there, probably.
we enjoyed the apples.
Yeah, we love the apples. I push the kids down in the stroller and get the apples and come home and
Okay, so that's
make
ongoing,
a pie.
Okay,
right?
we know where we want to go with that.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, Jack.
All right, so the next one is the 43 Blackstone Street. As we all know, I've been trying to attempt to get a buy from this property owner. To no avail after sending first class mail, certified mail. Sending the constable out there with paperwork. The board suggested that I reach out to Karis and give her all the timeline and get her opinion on what our next step should be. I'm waiting to hear back from Karis.
Do you want to, I don't know if they're in the loop on Karis's situation?
Well, Karis is dealing with land court as we speak. And then she's dealing with a couple of town meetings. So I don't know how quickly we will get a response from her.
Yeah, maybe a little time. Oh.
I mean, that, to me, he's really being unresponsive.
Yes.
But, and I think Colleen may have touched on this a little bit, we can't really do anything else at this time because we can't harass.
We've done, as she phrased, as she mentioned last meeting, we've done what we can, both Colin and Jack, and from what perspective, it's.
We have to wait for someone who has more knowledge on it than us to give us, you know, the direction to go in from here. And if we have to wait because she's got other things that are more urgent or that she's in the middle of right now, that's the way it is. Because we really can't proceed in any direction until we get that answer.
I mean,
That he continues to be unresponsive.
Well, I believe Colleen said the next thing that she could also do is order of condemnation.
Right, that's exactly what I thought,
oh,
that
And
condemn,
that's another board of health.
condemn the property, because it's, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. But I mean, you've got a
I've never
family
I've
living
never
there.
been part of that. Tom, have you been part of a,
I've only been part of one property condemnation.
okay, Joyce,
Yeah,
have you been,
yeah,
okay, so,
For a different reason.
yeah, but
But it's a process. So I guess you'd have to know that we have valid criteria for putting such a.
because we've got a septic system, it's a non-septic system, for one thing, and you've got a family there that's living there. And is it not working, and is it, can they be contaminated? You talk about contaminating kids.
Yeah, so-
There's a lot of kids there, because I've seen a lot of kids there.
So point being is, we'd have to make sure that the criteria we're using to take such a step, we're on solid ground. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, I think I remember Lenny
That's
in the past giving us that advice,
that's
that it's a major step.
that's a major step. Not to say it's not worth taking, I'm just saying we just need to make sure that our ducks are in a row. And if Colleen feels that at this point, that's an alternative, she would know. She's the health agent, she's got a lot of experience there,
Right.
and you've probably been through a couple,
Mhm.
right? So I would just want to make sure that we're okay. That's all. But I would, if we're not, if we can't get any,
Well, I would,
Same at the,
the other thing, the other thing is, because it is within our purview, is to say to the owner, our next step, because you are not responding to us, is to,
that's actually maybe not a bad idea to say, look, you're kind of forcing a hand here that we don't want to play.
right,
But we have the authority to play such a hand if we do confirm. We wouldn't want to do that, but
right. I mean, this has been going on since before the summer started.
Well, he's had this property a few
Right.
years already. This has kind of been
Yeah,
I think the most frustrating thing is not getting any kind of a response.
exactly,
We're trying to work with them,
Yeah.
the property owner, for a solution.
right.
Yes.
And last time we were here, you left a message on his
I did,
machine. And,
again, trying to offer assistance in resolving this.
right,
did you ever happen to get a call back after that call? Just curious.
And I don't want to cross the line into harassment.
Correct.
right.
There's a limit.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'd like to knock on his door and introduce myself, but
You don't know whether he's gonna have a gun.
it's possible, but there's a limit to how many times
Yeah,
we
Right.
can,
right. That we should have to do that.
well, and, again, I don't want it to be a situation of harassment, because that's not the case. When you're
No, it's
working
not
with
harassment. It's acting under the law, within the purpose of the law. I mean, he is the one that's harassing us.
Okay, so, talk with Colleen and find out what the steps are to condemn that property, and then we can kind of measure as to whether or not we have everything in order,
Mhm.
before we even send any kind of a notice, because we don't want it to be a threat we can't back up.
That's correct. Yeah.
If we're gonna say we're gonna take that action, we need to be prepared to take it.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, maybe, Callis will be able to get back to us.
Just drop us a note.
Yeah,
Karis,
well,
what do you think about this? Come on. We pay you too.
Right, but it's hard when you're juggling multiple things. Okay, moving on.
And the last one I have is 35 Cape Road. A couple of weeks ago, the planning board sent out an email for an on-site plan review for this property, and to send any commentary the Board of Health may have. I forwarded the email to Tom Ryder for his review and to see if he had any comments on it, so I'm waiting for his response.
Okay, now, is this the one you were talking about?
Yes,
35 Cape Road?
Yeah,
Something.
yeah, that's the one
Okay.
with 40.
Now, we get a bill when Tom Ryder reviews the plan.
I haven't seen a bill come in where he
Okay,
itemizes it.
because again, situations like this where some of these, for us, some of these larger out of the ordinary projects, the path that they're taking from the planning board coming to us is different than what we've experienced in the past.
Well, and I just think that maybe they're following a protocol that, for whatever reason, I think is an appropriate protocol to follow. Because for all these projects that come to a planning board, there are a variety of departments that will be affected by the project, right? We're just one: public safety, highway, conservation, right? So I think it's a prudent step that they've been doing that more regularly, and I'm happy to see that.
Oh, absolutely. It's nice to know what's going on, and if you have a question, to get it, to be able to ask it as far in advance as possible.
And I also don't think, with regard to the billing, correct me if I'm wrong, on these other ones that we've asked Tom to provide commentary on, I don't believe he's invoiced us for the time spent.
Okay,
Right.
I just want to make sure we're,
Understood. But he's, in my view, it's time spent. In my view, it's valid
Mhm.
to be invoiced.
oh, I agree.
How do we handle that? So it's nice that he's not,
Mhm.
but it's a service he's provided.
Well, then that's another part of that question is in the future, if more projects like this are gonna come down the road and they're gonna be circulated in the fashion that they're being circulated, which we all agree is a good path to
Good
take.
path, yeah.
Can we anticipate occurring some costs that we need to cover? Because I know you've had conversation with our town planner, I believe,
Talk with Jack, yeah, many
Right.
times, yeah.
because some of the, I believe we weren't sure whether or not they needed to go to Tom Ryder, where we have a town planner.
Well, the town planner, it helps the planning board in the planning
Yeah,
process.
that's what it is, yeah.
But as far as reaching out to other town departments for commentary, don't, that doesn't necessarily go to what the town planner does.
Okay.
And it's possible that that may have been where the protocols came from, because Jack's got a lot of experience, Jack Hunter. And it might have been that maybe when he kind of came on board to the town of Mendon, which wasn't that long ago, right?
That I don't know. You see when I got on board.
A couple of years, I don't know.
Yeah.
He might have brought along some concepts that said, this would be a good thing to kind of incorporate as these plans are coming to us. Why don't we, I'm just, again, I'm guessing, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
But
you're allowed to, so.
I
Okay.
just, it's a great thing that they're doing. And again, even if your comment is have no comment,
Mhm.
it's a great.
Jack is a real nice guy, really thorough.
Oh,
I mean, we worked with him independently because of how we would, Jay, Kraus, me. He came to the studio and worked with us to say, look, this is crazy. This is a rural, road, this is, historic thing and blah, blah. And they changed it. They changed the plan.
Awesome. That's
But
what you'd want.
Yeah.
Brings a lot of experience. So,
yeah, but they put 56 houses in there instead of 37.
Say,
They've got 56 houses in there and that
they've got 50
56 houses.
in that plan now?
Yeah,
Are you kidding?
I wish.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I thought there were 23.
They used to be.
All right, we're very off topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
okay.
sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No, but, oh, okay.
All right,
Yeah.
let's, we have no health agent updates.
She did tell me to let the board know, she did talk with Sean Reardon, about how he plans on contacting the people with the well, with the blasting and stuff like that, and is via email.
I'll be an email.
Yeah, me and Tom talked about it, and we think it's better that the Board of Health sends a letter out saying, hey, expect this hoping that you'll sign it type of thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I'm sure, don't check their
I have
emails every
email.
day.
Right.
Yeah, and some people don't have.
Okay, so we're gonna take it upon ourselves to do, conventional mail.
That was what, they-
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think this, like I said, some folks, I being one sometimes, won't check my email on a regular basis, and then you get a pile of them. You skip over.
Skip,
things,
yeah.
Right? Doesn't get your attention.
Well, that's fine.
So having something through standard mail specifically to the topic that we're trying to get an answer to is just, I think, a good, solid way of hopefully getting the attention.
Do we ask for a, like a yes or no response? In other words, rather than get, if it's yes, they're gonna respond with their results,
Well, we want them to respond with.
Right.
results.
Well, the goal here is to get the release, is to ask about the release,
right?
right?
Okay, so if we don't get the release, that's a no.
So I guess, how do you want to present it? I don't know what your thought was in presenting it. Are we looking to?
Well, actually, we're not the ones gonna get the release.
Mhm.
Mr. Reardon has to get the release.
Well, we could be a quote unquote go-between to provide them to Sean. Through the Board of Health, we could be communicating with our residents, asking about getting a signed release so that the information could be shared publicly. We could obtain that, and we're part of this process. So if we get the releases signed from these residents, we can then communicate with Sean and say, Sean, we had all these residents, or maybe a resident didn't, but all these residents have sent back a confirmation or signed this release form. So now we're able to communicate just results.
Is there a standard release form that Mr. Reardon is using?
that I have no idea.
Because we obviously, if we're gonna supply them with the form via mail, we want to use the same form that he's emailed.
I would agree. Maybe we could get a copy of that.
And mail them out. Okay.
Right.
Anything else on 45, 49 Uxbridge Road?
Nope.
All right, we'll go to topics not anticipated within 48 hours.
I only have one question of Jack. Do we get our COVID test kits?
We did it, just got another fresh batch in today.
So we've got how many?
How many do we have?
Well, in that recent order, how many kits did we put in for?
I think I put in for 5,000,
5,000.
I believe so, yeah.
And so have
I probably could get 5.
they been slowly, we've been distributing them out to different?
Yeah, the first shipment that I received in, that expires, I want to say November. Yeah, it expires in November. That box, the 2/3 gone.
Okay.
The shipment I just got received in just today, that expires in March of 2025.
Okay.
So we got a little more mileage on those.
Yeah, so I'm gonna contact the school, library, I already gave some to the senior center.
Excellent.
I was kind of holding the first box here in the town hall and Board of Health office until I get those boxes.
Yeah, I appreciate you rotating the stock.
Good.
Good practice.
I'll let that.
Nothing goes to waste.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to good and welfare for the board.
I had one there.
Do you want us to sign this to Dan?
So this was the
Oh,
item
sorry.
discussion.
Sorry.
Let's put it
I'm glad, I didn't understand where that belonged, so I'm glad that you pointed that out to me.
So what this is, these were the, from the last meeting, I was asked to work, with Jackie, draw up the letters. Thank you to various entities for assistance with the Board of Health, in some situations. So this is a reflection of those letters. I thought it would be nice if the, board members were, wanted to review them, they were okay with them, and then have each of us sign them if they're acceptable.
I thought it was a very good idea. I think it's important that we do those kinds of things. It's, I like that.
So I suggest if everybody's good with it, you sign it first, give the Joyce for her to sign, give the Alan the sign, and Alan will give it to you, cut it out.
Okay?
Okay.
Alan's
And he's already signing his.
He's already
Now,
signed.
now that we paid attention,
He's right on it.
so I guess we're gonna go to the office.
We gotta start at the chair. It's only righteous. Start with the chair.
Just one of the team members. And you're right, Joyce, this is a good practice.
Yeah, I think, I think that it,
Recognition goes a long way.
and it makes them say,
But thank you.
well, yeah, there's nothing, to me, that's really important.
Thank you for cleaning up the format there.
They're gonna send you a card.
All right, so while we're signing, next meeting,
The next meeting would be October 9th.
October 9th, that's gonna be. Oh, you know it.
Yep.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Well, just out of curiosity, is some point, are we looking to get back to the 6 PM start time?
Was it 6 PM or 6:30?
Well, it was one of those two,
Yeah, I would say once we get into November.
more into November. Okay, just
I'd
one.
be, I'd be more than happy to,
Yep.
Ta-da.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think people do hard work and they do things, it's part of their job, but not necessarily. It's good.
Appreciation goes a long way.
I think so too.
well, it also makes it much easier to ask again
Mm.
when because that everybody's already got a full plate.
Right.
So whenever you're overwhelmed and you're asked to do something additional, you always seem to find time for those people that appreciated your work the last time around.
Yep. Agreed. Joyce, can you these down road?
Okay.
Illustrious administrator.
Thank you very much for getting those letters in order. Motion to adjourn, if we don't have anything else.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
All, yeah.